On today's episode, I have Gerd Wuestemann joining me. He's the president and CEO of Scottsdale Arts. So if you're curious about the Arizona art scene, this is the episode you want to tune in for. Gerd, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me on today's podcast.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
So Gerd, you work for Scottsdale Arts. Can you share a little bit more about who is Scottsdale Arts?
Yeah, that's a great and loaded question if ever there was one. So I've been here for a year and a half, or almost a year and a half. I came here in March of 18 as the new president and CEO of Scottsdale Arts. And we are a little difficult to understand because we're a big arts umbrella. And actually, there's something cool sort of hidden in this. We're kind of a prototype for a 21st century arts organization, which is interesting, and we'll talk about that a bit more. So Scottsdale Arts is a large arts umbrella. We're actually, I think, by budget and staff, the largest arts organization in Arizona. We're made up of 4 big branches and 2 major satellites. Our big parts are the Center for Performing Arts and the Scottsdale Civic Center. Right adjacent to it, the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, or SMOCA. Then we have Scottsdale Public Art, which is one of the oldest and really most thriving public art programs in the country, and a program that I've newly sort of named and reinstated, Scottsdale Arts Learning and Innovation. It's our education outreach program. So we do everything from working with 40,000 students throughout the year to lifelong learning programs for graceful aging and creative aging, etc. In addition to those 4 branches or pillars, we have 2 big satellites. One is our Arts Festival in March every year. That will celebrate its 50th anniversary this coming year. And kicking off on November 8 is the 9th iteration of Canal Convergence, our huge public art celebration on the Scottsdale waterfront. It's an amazing festival of public art. We install more than $1 million worth of public artworks across the canal and inside the canal and adjacent to it. We do music, education stuff, family events. We do artist talks and conferencing elements on it and stuff. So it's an amazing event. Last year, our attendance jumped from 35,000 people to 270,000 people in 1 year. It was an incredible thing, and so we're kind of riding high on that right now.
I had the opportunity to attend both of those events previously, and if you have not been to it, for our listeners, I would highly encourage going. I mean, even if you don't necessarily appreciate the arts as much as some of us do, it's certainly just a fun experience and a good excuse to get together with friends or family and whatnot, especially right in the heart of Old Town Scottsdale.
Yeah, it's a great party, and I think part of the beauty of this organization is our main campus is right on the Civic Center Plaza. So we're in the heart of Old Town, downtown Scottsdale, with this beautiful infrastructure of, scenic environment, bars, restaurants, hotels, everything's close by. It's a really good time to spend a little while with us.
I'm sure everyone's very interested in knowing, what does your average workday look like?
That's interesting. So I'm not sure that I have an average workday, which is something I really love about what I get to do. Because, in order to describe my workday, I draw back a little bit. I came here and took this position as a bit of a turnaround job. That's kind of what I do. I like to turn around and build arts organizations. Our organization parts of the organization had a very long history. The center was built in 1975, so we've been around for a while. But some parts are really new, and this creation of the umbrella has been relatively recent. And there were 2 things we struggled with, I think. Over the last 10, 15 years, we've struggled with a unifying vision and leadership. So we had a lot of revolving doors at the top. And as a result, the organization became a bit destabilized, right? And sort of everybody just takes care of their own part of the business, but nothing works well together. And that's always the problem. And the second piece that I think was a challenge is we had isolated ourselves a bit in the valley from others. We didn't work so well in the sandbox with other colleagues and peers and organizations. And coming here, I clearly was charged with this idea of, let's rebuild the organization, let's re-energize it, let's look into the future, let's develop new audiences, and also represent sort of this next generation of Scottsdale citizens, right? Scottsdale's changing fast. I mean, if you go to the Galleria and see the Yelpers at work, it's a totally different vibe from what Scottsdale used to be, which is much more snowbirds and traditional audiences. So because of this idea of really rebuilding and reinventing the organization, every day feels and looks a little different. And also, even if it's this relatively short period of time of 18 months that I've been here, or less than, It's been interesting how my job has changed and evolved, right? At first, it's a lot of meetings just to repair relationships and really rebuilding the internal culture. And then that morphed into really planting a new vision and moving some big pieces forward. And I'm happy we were able to do that. And then stabilizing financially as well. So I typically get up really early, and sadly, rather than doing something fun for myself, I usually sort of roll out and make coffee and start working for a bit, because I have a couple hours completely to myself and I get a lot done. My days are really taken up with a lot of meetings. I have a amazing executive assistant. She populates my schedule, and I basically push a button, see where I'm headed next, and follow that blindly.
And I'm curious, I mean, when you're not meeting with other awesome individuals like us on the Easy BizLink podcast, who else are you commonly meeting with?
You know, a lot of it is, of course, we're trying to build a robust base of donors and patrons. That's a big part of it. I talk to a lot of artists and arts administrators across the valley. I meet with a lot of community leaders. Our business community has not been as involved with us as they should be. So that's a big part of my work. And then, of course, a fair amount of internal meetings. We have almost 200 staff members altogether. And in rebuilding the internal culture, it was important for me to also sort of, set an example, hopefully, and not be kind of a jerk of how to run the organization. So I try to be, involved with everybody and really approach everybody and be approachable, because, arguably the audience experience you have with us is more dependent on how box office does their job, or our stage manager, than whatever I cook up in my office. So I try to really be there for them, for the team. We also have a board of trustees and a number of advisory boards. I try to reconcile my work with the boards because they represent our community input, right? And so that's important as well.
I want to get back to one of your earlier comments about how the local business community hasn't really been that involved in the Arizona or Scottsdale art scene. How could businesses get more involved? I'm sure there's a lot of them that would love to, but they just don't know how.
That's a really great question. I think part of the problem is that we as arts nonprofits haven't done a very good job in speaking their language, right? Like, for instance, I, as soon as I came here, actually managed to get on the board of the Chamber of Commerce, as well as on our CVB board, the Experience Scottsdale Tourism Board. And when companies are concerned with things like ROI, or if I give money to you, how can that come back to me, or how can it help our business, or how can it help our employees? And I think we as arts administrators need to learn to speak that language and understand what the needs on the other side are. I think that's part of the problem. I do also think, though, that in Arizona, strangely, for a city that is as vibrant as it is and economically as successful as it is, our corporate stewardship is not nearly where you would think it would be by now. So I think from both sides, we need to really remind ourselves that the arts in particular build a more beautiful, robust community, create quality of life, and often are one of the greatest business tools we have available. If you try to retain your best workers, if you try to bring new businesses here, and work in economic development, art and culture are a cornerstone. And I think that message hasn't quite gotten across. So I think we have some work to do as ambassadors and advocates.
I think that's so interesting, because I do come from a background in economic development. And so as I was meeting with new companies that were looking to enter the Arizona Phoenix market, so many of them would ask about what's the art scene like, because they were coming from, those large metropolitan areas. So I'm curious, as ambassadors, how can we all help? What could we share with those new businesses or those local leaders that people wouldn't necessarily know about the Arizona art scene?
So it's interesting. Arizona, and Phoenix in particular, is sort of perceived as a second city in the arts, right? It's a really large metro area, but we don't have a lot of legacy institutions. What I would share with the business community is therein lies a huge opportunity, because that means we can make, with relatively small investments, we can leverage them to make not incremental but exponential change, right? A little goes a long way in this community. And we in the arts leadership are trying to and beginning to be more scrappy, so we are more connected. I'm working with a couple of my colleagues and peers right now to put some bigger umbrella events together 2 or 3 years from now that would raise some national headlines, right? And we're looking to build these business partnerships because, if you're a $50,000 corporate donor in New York, that's no great shakes. Here, that makes you a major player. So I think that's a message we should send to companies, that you can be really a significant participant for relatively low investment. On the flip side, I think what's also fascinating is that this community is really eager and hungry for deeper involvement in the arts. And I see incredible opportunity in that. And from volunteering to driving people to events, to leveraging these events to really get great exposure. And I can tell you, I see opportunities everywhere. We just started a clinical study between MD Anderson, Banner Health, and us as an arts organization about the impact of creative education on long-term chemo brain, damage from chemotherapy, and how it can help really relegate some of those damages. That's an exciting field to step into. And by exploring some of these new ideas and being really creative, I think we can come together and build a really robust platform.
You briefly mentioned how Arizona stacks up amongst other metropolitans throughout the country when it comes to our art scene. What kind of talent do we have in our own backyard?
I think we have extraordinary talent in the Valley. My impression so far is, and maybe this is because my last job was in Louisiana, which was the birthplace of modern music, right? I mean, you can't get away from jazz, blues, rock and roll, swamp pop, everything. It's always surrounds you. I lived in the heart of Cajun and Zydeco country. I mean, it was thick as can be with music. I feel that the Valley has maybe a heavier focus on visual arts. I think it's an extraordinarily vibrant visual arts scene with some great quality. And some fine institutions as well. What surprised me coming here is that there is, of course, a very vibrant music scene, and it's by and large an indigenous scene. In other words, there's a lot of great Latino music coming out of here, right, which you would expect. But we haven't materialized on that nearly as much as we could and should. There's a huge audience base available to us, and I think we should step into that realm a bit more, and organizations should support helping local artists build those platforms. So one of the things we are about to do with Scottsdale Arts is a program that my sort of working title is Art Spark. It's really a career development program where we help connect the dots for artists, especially emerging artists. People that come out of college, just graduated, left their studio space or lost their studio space, and now need a little jump starts to move into a viable career as an artist. So we provide space, we'll provide funding, we'll provide gallery and sales opportunities. We provide business classes so you can learn how to write a business plan and have a career path. And for performing artists, we also create opportunities where you can perform in our centers and some of the smaller spaces, or open a show for a national act. So you get that level of exposure and really sort of professionalism as you grow into those roles. So I feel that modern arts organizations need to really be part of that process. It's no longer just us putting a nice show on stage. It's really us stepping in and being a community connector.
I had no idea that you guys provided so many tools and resources to the local artists. So I'll be sure
to... It's all new stuff. Yeah, it's a new direction for us, really. Yeah.
So talking about the new direction, what's your vision for the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. So it's funny you say that. I actually took this job with a 3, 5, 10, and 15-year vision, so I could get really older out here. I'm pretty old already, but depending on sort of various doors we walk through, there are lots of opportunities. First and foremost, I mentioned this earlier, in a circumspect way, Scottsdale Arts is kind of a prototype for a 21st century arts organization. Museums and performing arts venues are reinventing themselves as community spaces. Most museums now do, yoga in the galleries, music on the lawn, family day. Performing arts venues all do outreach and education, etc. Because of the nature of how we grew together, we already have just about every aspect of art and cultural life as part of our umbrella, right? Now we need to just put it together, and when it comes together, it really becomes much more than the sum of its parts. Canal Convergence is a great example. Last year was the first year the entire organization worked together under the lead of our public art division to make this event. And as a result, our attendance jumped like crazy. We had this incredible kids village in a collaboration with ASU and the city of Scottsdale. We had nonstop engagement through artist talks that our museums people put together. Our performing arts folks booked all the bands for every evening and stuff. So when the whole organization came together, we could provide this incredible service and level of engagement. We have a beautiful campus, but that campus hasn't been developed or redeveloped in more than 2.5 decades. Scottsdale is poised to, knock on wood, pass a bond issue on November 5. So it's coming up very soon. And if you're listening and you're a Scottsdale voter, by all means, look at the bond measures and hopefully find a way to say yes to 1, 2, and 3. We have roughly $50 million, 50, in this bond package to improve our facilities. and this entire Civic Center campus. We built an iconic outdoor stage. We rebuilt our small stage. We improved our gateways and parking structures, etc. And after that public investment, we are poised to raise additional dollars to significantly enlarge the size of our museum, which is dedicated to contemporary art only. It's a wonderful museum, nationally accredited, highly rated, but it is fairly small. So significantly increasing its size and potentially working with other organizations also to do other developments, maybe build a larger performing arts venue adjacent to our buildings as well. That's a future direction for us. So it's about physical infrastructure. It's about this coming together, the umbrella, creating a 21st century arts organization that serves all of our community in its diversity, age, ethnicity, social strata, everything. We want everybody to be engaged and have access to great arts experiences, and become an advocate and a agency for career development for artists as well. That will make us a rounded organization. So for the next 10 years, I think that's where we'll cut out.
It sounds like you're going to be pretty busy, but all of that is very exciting. I'm curious, I mean, knowing that you are an artist yourself, would you mind just sharing a little bit more about, you know, who you are as an individual and what drew you into taking this role with Scottsdale Arts?
That's a great question, and I'll give you sort of my life in a nutshell. As you can tell from the dulcet lull of my accent, I wasn't born in this country. I grew up in a small town in Germany, in a really poor working class family. My entire family history for 500 years, everybody lived within, to this day, everybody lives within 10 miles of my hometown, a town of about 20,000 people. Very old town. We got our city rights in 976 and never grew after that. It was an interesting thing. So I grew up in a family when, to this day, nobody ever went to college. When I was 5 years old, I got a guitar in my hand, and it was the thing for me. I was fascinated by it, and it completely changed my life. And I'm a really passionate advocate for arts education because I've experienced firsthand how much it transforms lives. So it opened all of my pathways. It opened a tremendous level of opportunities for me. I ended up being really good as a classical guitarist and was fortunate to get support from my government to study. I won an international competition when I was 11 and started touring when I was 12. I had my first agent. Lived on my own since I was 15 and studied all over Europe for a while. Eventually ended up on a scholarship to do post-grad work in New York. Then moved to San Francisco for my second master's, to Tucson, Arizona for my doctorate. They have the world's biggest doctorate program in guitar performance there.
Which I didn't know.
Yeah, it's a pretty incredible thing. And my professor there built this incredible program. And I really fell in love with the desert. I thought it was an incredible experience. You know, I come from a very gray country, and living in this sort of bright light with, you know, you can see forever, and it sort of lifts your spirit. It was an incredible experience. And I always thought I might end up back in Arizona, curiously enough. I left there and moved to Louisiana to take on a professor position besides touring and recording. And eventually, a few years later, had some bad luck. I had some bad accidents. I had 2 bad accidents, shattered my left wrist and then my right shoulder a year later. Both are really some of the worst injuries as a classical guitarist you can have, right? So for 2 years or so, I couldn't play concerts at all. And it's that moment when you say, well, shit, my savings are gone, now what? And I had to reinvent myself. So I, after the initial sort of months of depression, you come out of it and say, you know what? It's a luxury. I'm in my 30s and I get to sort of start over. So I said, I always had a bit of an entrepreneurial bug, so I found a couple of partners. We built a company together. We put some money together and had an investor and built a company building carbon fiber guitars. So it was an innovative product, but still close to home for me. Eventually sold the business to one of the really big music outfits in the country, PV manufacturing. And then I built another small business myself, and then there was this opportunity to take over a small arts council in Louisiana, and in Lafayette, Louisiana, the heart of Cajun, Creole, Zydeco country, and wonderful place. So I took on this little arts council. Very quickly was fortunate to find money, about $25 million, to build an arts center. And built this thing, then built a brand and the programming around it. And over the years, we absorbed other organizations and kept growing until we became like the 3rd largest organization in the state, in a smaller city, albeit. And at the end of that, sort of coming up towards 10 years, I felt like there was a week where we kicked off with Tedeschi Trucks Band, finished with the Avett Brothers, had this awesome avant-garde jazz trio, the Bad Plus, a New York modern dance company, and opened a new set of gallery shows, and did a big education conference. And that was sort of 1 week in our life, and I looked at that and I thought, this is probably as far as I can see here. It's time to look for my next challenge. I applied for this gig, and here I am.
I love it. We are so lucky to have someone with your capabilities and background and passion for the arts, representing our business community and representing the arts community here in Scottsdale.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. I certainly am passionate about what I do. It's not an easy thing to run an arts nonprofit, but it's the best job in the world, no question. And in particular because I get to work with incredible people that share that same passion. I really love my crew and most of the artists we get in touch with, and it's an amazing thing to serve our community that way.
It sounds like you've had quite the journey. I'm just excited for you to release the book. I'm sure it's just a matter of time until that comes out.
I don't know. I don't know if anybody's interested in that story, but I do think a little bit every day about this particular journey I had, and what that means for my work and what it means for how I can relate to other people. I think whatever we carry with us sort of over the years does shape our ability to inspire others, and that to me is a really important part of it.
Talking about inspiring others, I would also like to pick your brain for those other younger professionals that are trying to find themselves. What would you encourage them to think about as they're looking to advance in their personal and professional lives?
That's a great question. So, I should start with a disclaimer and say that I feel like I've never had a real job in my whole life. And I mean that in the best possible way. I've really never, I was fortunate that I ended up being a bit of a prodigy and grew into that prodigy career at a very young age and just followed my passion through that. But even as I was forced to reinvent myself, I never felt like it was a real job. I just felt like I did something that I was really curious about. I think oftentimes we try to bend ourselves into pretzel because we don't allow ourselves to sort of just follow our curiosity, even in school, I think that's often a challenge, Some would argue that, schools by design tend to actually extinguish that sort of flame of curiosity more than they stoke it. And I think that's real problematic. So this idea of healthy curiosity is important for me. The next thing is I have a real penchant for risk-taking, right? So I also never thought of myself as an administrator. I really think of myself more as an arts entrepreneur. And to me, that's a really important distinction because, I think I didn't come here to just sort of maintain the status quo or, make our budgets work out. I really wanted to grow things and contribute and make cool stuff happen, right? And take care of my staff so that they can all grow and hopefully at some point run their own organizations. That's really important to me as well. So this idea of willing to take risks, is really critical. And the third piece that I think I try to remind myself every day is this idea of I, as the CEO, am there to serve my staff. I take that very seriously. I have the luxury that I get to make the final decisions. At the end of the day, I sign paychecks and it's my call, and that's cool. But that also means I have a really grave responsibility for everybody's well-being, and that's not just make sure that they can get paid, but also that they really enjoy the work environment and how we relate to each other. So to me, that idea of don't be a dick just because you have power. You should wield that wisely. So as you grow into your careers, I think it's important to remember that. And then for me, the central piece about the second part of my life has been about service. I really want to build a better community. I feel like we live in a challenging time. A lot of stuff is broken sort of on the national level. But on a local level, we can still act with integrity and we can still really change the world one great show at a time or one great exhibit at a time or, one conversation at a time. And I think that I sort of have the luxury that I have a pretty sizable mouthpiece to do just that, right? And so for me, that calling to service is a really powerful thing. the first half of my life and career as a performer was a much more self-indulgent thing, right? I mean, I could say that, yeah, I provided something beautiful to this world, but it's mostly about the ego trip, really, right? So I might as well make the second half of my life about hopefully serving a deeper and greater good. And so for me, that's been extremely fulfilling. For me, it's never just about the paycheck. It's about those things. And I think for everybody, if you're sort of building your careers, if you can find that place in your being, right, that place where you feel like, I mean, especially as I get older, I want certain amenities. I mean, I want to have a decent paycheck, no doubt. And, I want to know that I can retire at some point, right? That kind of stuff is important. But if that can grow inside this framework of service, fulfillment, and passion, and kindness to others, right? That to me is sort of the winning strategy.
I love everything that you said, and I think that's definitely in alignment with a lot of the wonderful leaders that I've been able to surround myself with, and what makes our community so special and so great. So thank you for sharing some of that insight as far as like your philosophy. I would also love to know a little bit more around professional development or personal development. You have talked about how you really work on helping the employees within your organization and helping them to grow. How are you helping yourself to grow?
Yeah, well, talk to my wife, she would say I'm growing in all the wrong ways. But that is actually one of my greatest struggles, I have to say. I have a friend who once said, dude, you have like 2 speeds, on and off, and that's about it. And when it's on, you're going all the way. And I can't turn it off, but I can't stay there very long, and it's not healthy for me either. The idea of a balanced life is a real challenge for me, I have to admit that, and I'm sort of, kind of accepting that at this point. Maybe that's just how I'm wired. But within that, I do think it is important to learn how to sort of find those reset moments, those buttons, right? So the biggest challenge in my job is, especially because it was a bit of a turnaround, there's sort of constantly small fires smoldering that I still have to deal with, right? So you have this vision piece and this overarching idea and concept, and every day you get distracted from that a bit, right? There's a lot of stuff that pulls you into the mundane, the here and now, the stuff that's not working yet. Trying to get back on track is really challenging. Because, at some point when there's a hill in front of you, you can't see past it anymore, right? And so I'm trying to, I've now dedicated like a time frame, that's why, hence the really early mornings, to myself, where I don't just start answering emails or whatever, or dealing with backlog, but I'm really trying to spend an hour to look at my strategy, to fine-tune things, to develop and re-implement new ideas, or to read a little bit about things that help us shift the horizon, right? Or I talk to friends and colleagues. The other day, last Saturday, we had Rufus Wainwright playing an amazing show with us, and I think he's an absolute genius. He happens to be married to a German arts administrator, which is pretty awesome. So we spent a long time after the show hanging out together and talking. And that piece, that hour-long conversation, a 2-hour conversation, stays with me for a long time and feeds me for a long time. And so it reminded me of that's sort of the thing we always forget. There are parts in every job that we need to refill our soul, right? Because a lot of the day-to-day stuff sort of just chips away at that. Reminding yourself to get back on the vision piece, but also reminding yourself that there has to be an emotional connection to what we do, and there has to be sort of this soul fulfillment that's part of it, right? That's really important. So for me, that happens. I take a little time every day to walk into our galleries and look at a couple of pieces to remind myself why I'm doing what I'm doing. I go to a lot of shows. I mean, when you run an arts organization, especially one as big as this, you have a really built-in social life, right? So I see a lot of very different things, music, theater, dance, etc. And it's really important for me. And then I try to have these ongoing conversations with really awesome creatives and artists, because that sort of rebuilds my spirits and also help me see a little further.
It sounds like you've found, your passion project, and it sounds like you're living a very fulfilled life. I'm curious. I mean, I'm kind of guessing or assuming that work doesn't really feel like work. It feels more like a lifestyle for you. But when you're technically not working, what are you doing, to let your hair down a little bit to relax or get away, or what do you do?
I frequently let my hair down the entire 13th of an inch that I have. So that is a good question. So first of all, I have an amazing. I got married 2 years ago for the first time in my life. So this is like a new thing. And my wife is a visual artist, so she's super kick-ass. She also is a redhead Cherokee, Scottish Irish. So she can definitely push back, which is important for me. I finally was old enough to realize that matters. So for me, actually, I think my wife coming into my life was a big catalyst for my career as well, because it's just sort of changed things, right? And as I said, she's an awesome artist. So that's a big part. I really enjoy interacting with her. She has a studio in our backyard, and she sort of, it spreads out into the yard and into the pool at times. It's an interesting experience. We have 3 dogs and a cat, and that's a pretty awesome thing. So I love our Muppet show. It's a trip. And we like to hang out with them. And then, of course, I play music every day. So, I'm a classical guitarist. I play the occasional concert still. I still make the occasional record, and I try to practice a little every day. And I also play drums, like jazz, right? That's my other passion. For me, it's classical guitar in the early morning because I'm still focused, my ears work. And after a long day, playing drums is like, you get to hit stuff. I mean, it's awesome. And then I really like cycling, and I just bought a new road bike again and starting to hopefully get a little bit better shape as well. And this is just an awesome place for cycling, so I'm hoping to really step that up a bit. And then the first year was really about settling in and getting this organization on track, but now I feel like we live in one of the most beautiful places on earth, I think. It's an incredible state. And so we're starting to set a goal of every couple of weekends or so to get out there and go hiking and explore. And, I love to, go hiking, camping, put out a tent and bring the dogs and stuff like that. It's been a great place for it. So I think there will be a little bit more of that in our future.
Yeah. With your office location and the proximity to Old Town Scottsdale, there's a lot of great restaurants within your backyard. I'm curious, do you have any favorites?
Well, I have a beautiful sort of corner office with an awesome view over the whole plaza that is actually on top of Jewel of the Crown, the Indian restaurant. So I often tell people, if you try to find me, I'm above the Indian restaurant. And it's a really good place if you like Indian food. But of course, there's Los Olivos right around the corner from us, which has been there, I think, since before time, and will be there since after the apocalypse. So that's an awesome place. They have this blue bubble room that I love to sit in because it feels like you're underwater. There, I like a lot of the restaurant scene here. Moving here from Louisiana, I do miss some of those things too, I have to admit. But there are a couple of really cool places in Old Town. F&B is phenomenal. I really love their style. I think their chef just won a James Beard Award for the Southwest, which is much warranted, I think. It's a really awesome place, really cool people. I'm not so fond of concept restaurants, which are taking over the valley, because I just feel like, I don't know, it always just seems a little corporate to me, right? I like people that actually are in the kitchen owning a restaurant. It's really hard work, but I tend to like places like that better. And I'm a lifelong lover of dive bars. So TT's Roadhouse, just down the street from us.
That's where we can find
place. You? Yeah, if in doubt. If I ever want to disappear, so don't find me there. Maybe I shouldn't have said this. Now I have to find something else. Because if I want to be left alone, sitting in a dive bar, staring a hole in the wall, having a whiskey is a nice thing.
So one thing before we wrap up, I'm sure a lot of us are just dying to know, you mentioned that you still are playing and you do an occasional show. Do you have any shows coming up?
No, I just did a little something in Memphis a few months ago. I helped as a consultant work on building a new theater there, and we did a little inauguration concert, and I got to play at that. That was really fun. I don't have anything coming up here. I have some people who say I should play a concert in our venue at some point, and I know this is seems to become the age of nepotism, but I'm not sure that I'm quite ready for it. So I try to be very sort of cautious not to mix one part of my career with the other, but who knows?
If we want to listen to your music, where could we find it?
I have a couple of recordings on iTunes, so by all means, spend your $9.99. I think I get $2 off of that, so, look me up.
Big money.
Big money, exactly. And, with classical music recordings, you sell tens of records. It's an exciting business model. I made, I think, 12 recordings over the course of my career, and I think 2 or 3 are still on iTunes. There are a couple more on CD Baby as well. If anybody still knows what a CD is, it's a little silver disc. Grab a couple of those, and yeah, that's about it.
So for those individuals that want to learn more about Scottsdale Arts, is there a website or somewhere else they can find you?
Yeah, we have, we just launched this spring an awesome new web presence. When you're an umbrella like us with these different parts, it's hard to kind of brand yourself. It's like, Procter & Gamble, nobody knows who that is, but we all buy 409 and Arm & Hammer or whatever, right? So we have a bit of that conundrum. But we launched this new web presence, which is cool because it's 6 individual sites for each of our 4 branches in those 2 big event satellites. But they're all nestled together under the overarching Scottsdale Arts site, and our events calendar sort of, ties it all together. So you check us out, scottsdalearts.org, or you can go to each of the individual pieces as well. It's a lot of cool stuff. It's a modern site, so it's really user-friendly. You can Insta and Facebook with us and whatever else people do, and it's a cool way to learn more about us.
Awesome. Gerd, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, it's great to be here today, and thanks for having me.